Hello and welcome to Symbols and Cynicism, a podcast where we talk about all of the things that I love, some of the things that I hate, and this wacky adventure that we call life. My name is Bob, I'm your host, and I'm glad you're here today for an interview about interviewing with Carlisle Schools Superintendent Bob Fischer and parking garages. Let's get started. Welcome back. Before we get into too much of today's episode, I just wanted to let you know that we are taking a week off, so there will be no episode next week, April 6th. Have a happy Easter without us, but we will be back with a new episode on April 13th. Monday the 13th, not Friday. Coming up on our next run of episodes starting on April 13th, we've got Drums in a Gym with Connexus director Nick Riley talking all about upcoming WGI Indoor Drumline Championships, an interview with Rob Deemer of the Institute on Composer Diversity. Star Wars Day is coming up, so we've got a special all Star Wars episode. Drum Corps season is around the corner, so of course Harrison will be joining us to preview the season and get us ready for summer, plus tips for retirement and summer relaxation for music teachers, and of course, more Clone Wars. We've got Little Boba Fett, Ventress, The Bad Batch, The Night Sisters, and The Mortis Arc. So many great things coming up. I hope you'll join us for that series of episodes. But before we do that, we have to get this episode in. We have had some fan mail recently. Some people are catching up on the brackets and are loving that, and more suggestions are coming in, which we are recording. People agree with me on the McDonald's kiosk, which is nice. And one fan tells me that the Burger Kings in his area are starting to install the kiosks. I did not know that. I don't go into Burger King that much. I'm more of a drive. Their bathrooms are not as clean on the average as McDonald's bathrooms. So if I have a choice, I would pick a McDonald's bathroom over a Burger King. I do like Burger King food, but I'm a drive-through guy there. So anyway, Burger King, you're on warning. Stop it with the kiosks. Whether you're a listener, new or old friend, thank you for listening. We occasionally get, I love the show. How can I support the show? And it's easy. Tell your friends, share us on Facebook. More listeners mean more fun. Every time I get a download notification, boom, dopamine hit. It's great. If you want to financially support us, you can do so with the support the show link in the show description, or buy some merch from the merch store at themarchingarts.com/RHS. You can also find us on YouTube at Robert H. Sloan RHS Music, all one word. This includes old podcast episodes, shorts, and the Star Wars episodes only playlist, which is in release order. There's some RHS music composition stuff on there too, so if that's not your speed, you can parse that out and ignore it. We're on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok at Symbols and Cynicism, a podcast, and RHS Music has its own Facebook at RHS Music. All right, on to today's show. We have an interview about interviewing for jobs with Bob Fischer. He is the superintendent of Carlisle School District. That's in Southwest Ohio. And this is about what he looks for in a teaching candidate. So if you're out there applying for jobs, looking for jobs, this is about everything from resume to job offer. What do you wear? What do you say? How do you answer those normal questions that every interviewer asks? Yes, there's a little bit from his side to learn. So if you're also in a committee, on a committee who's doing part of the interview process, there's some good stuff for you too. But this is directed at people who are looking for jobs. So a great interview with Bob, and he's a former band director. So it's something there for everyone. Yes, it centers around music jobs, but there's a lot of stuff for everybody. It's not just about music. And parking garages. Let's roll. Bring in Bob Fischer. Hey, welcome to the podcast. We have a new guest with us to the podcast. He's listened a few times in the past. This is a former band director, current superintendent at Carlisle Local Schools. He has served as superintendent and principal in multiple positions in several schools throughout his career. He's also a husband and a father. Welcome to the show, Bob Fischer, how are you today?
I am great. Thank you very much for the wonderful introduction.
Good. Well, tell us a little bit more about yourself, how, a little bit like transition from where'd you start, where are you now? Give us like the quick update on who Bob Fischer is.
So this is my finishing up year 32 as an educator. I was a teacher as a band director for 10 years. Most notable stops were when I was at Brookville High School as the band director there, and then at Talawanda High School as well. I've been an administrator for 22 years. I've served as a high school building principal. I've served as a middle school principal. I've been an assistant principal. In the last 10 years, I've been fortunate to be a superintendent. I've been at Carlisle for 2 years now. And previous to that, I was at National Trail Local Schools for 6 years as a superintendent. My very first superintendent position was at Twin Valley South. We're in the middle of basketball season right now, so I'm proud. I'm a proud Miami alumni. I'm very excited about what's going on in the basketball world right now. But and then high school, I spent my time at Marietta High School back when the Wall of Sound was the Wall of Sound. So I'd like to very excited to be able to be on this, to talk with you today. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
So was Marshall Kimball your band director?
He was. I'm a Marshall Kimball kid. I was in high school, so it would date me a little bit, but 1986 to 1990.
Okay.
Had an awesome experience with band, and it was because of Marshall that I became a teacher. His love and passion for students is what made me want to go into that field and do that and become a teacher. And then, as an administrator, I kind of took a lot of those same things. Every time I moved into something different, it was always because I wanted to be and help in a larger capacity. As a teacher, I wanted to impact kids for the love of music, lifelong learners, and want to play forever. And as a principal, I went into administration because I wanted to make it better for teachers. I wanted to make schools better places for kids and do that through our teachers. And then as a superintendent, very similar, I went through and I wanted to have a larger impact and make school, like I said, a great place for communities and a great place for kids to be. And so I've always it's always been because of what Marshall taught us that I've always focused my career goals on.
Well, Marshall's a legend. I met him a couple times just in passing way back in the day. Fantastic individual. I have a high school, actually, solo ensemble rating sheet from when I was in high school where I performed for him. And he gave me a 1 on my snare drum solo. Every band director, choir director, music educator listening to this podcast right now is screaming, why can't I get a former music educator as my superintendent? Like, man, that's a I would think that's a dream come true. Not that you're going to get favoritism, because any good administrator is going to be impartial, but it would be nice to have somebody who understands the things you walk through every day, day in and day out as a music educator. Do you feel like you're still in touch with that day-to-day struggle of music education?
I am, and I feel like I've been very lucky because as an administrator, I've had the fortune of having some really, really good band programs that have been in my schools, including right now at Carlisle. Our band director, John Oliver, does a fabulous job with our kids. The program is continuing to grow. But I've always been one of those two that, because, and a good friend of mine, Kenny Carpenter, I'm not sure if you know Kenny or not, but he was a band director. Yep. Kenny, when I took my first administrative job, it was at Carlisle, ironically, many years ago. And when I took the job, Kenny and I talk about this all the time. His first reaction was, oh man, I'm going to have this dude who I've heard about, Bob Fischer, coming in and being my principal. Man, what is that going to be like for me? Is he going to be in my room all the time? Is he going to be telling me how to do things? And I've always taken the principal idea that if I'm asked, I'll go in. If I'm not, I'm going to allow our teachers to do the things they need to do because it's not my program, it's theirs.
Yeah.
And I've always lived by that philosophy. But as far as being active, I am still exceptionally active in the music world today. I judge throughout the fall and winter. I've judged for OMEA for the past 25 years. Then I've also been a member of the Central States Judges Association and have been very active in that for the past 20 years as well. So that's kind of how I stay in touch with what's going on in the music world. I'm still attending drum corps shows and going to marching band events and staying in tune with what's going on. I still have a subscription to the Triad, even though it's online. And actually, I just joined the new subscription. I saw something called Baton. I just joined that recently to keep myself in tune with what's going on. And I still attend OMEA convention. Actually, ironically, this is the first year I've missed it in the last 20. But for me, it's a great escape because it's a way for me to get back to my roots and remember why. And sometimes it's an opportunity to be a refresher as to why I am doing the things that I'm doing. So yes, I still stay in touch and want to make sure that I keep active in with those opportunities and doing things in the music world.
That's great. Thank you so much for doing that. And I knew you were active. I knew you've been an adjudicator. Just wanted to let you be able to plug that. I think it would be two things as a band director. Like, one is you're thankful. I had a friend that used to have a superintendent who was a former music educator and a great piano player. And this guy would come down and like sit in with the jazz band, and she'd send me pictures like jealous. I was like, yes, I'm jealous. Like, how cool would that be? Or I guess it could also be intimidating, like you mentioned, like, oh man, if I mess up, he's going to know that my band's out of tune, or when most superintendents have no idea, like if the fight song's loud enough, they're happy, kind of a thing. But we're not here to talk about any of that. Let's talk about interviewing. I contacted you as a superintendent, former principal. I always thought that one of the primary, most important jobs of an administrator is staff hiring. If you get the right people in the classrooms and other, employed positions in your district, then your job becomes easier, right? Do you feel that way, or am I just blowing smoke?
No, I totally agree with that. I kind of have the philosophy is when you invest in the right people up front, leadership becomes a lot more about guiding than fixing. And that's one of the things that my whole principal idea is. I want to make sure that, I let my people do what they need to do. And the only way to do that is to ensure that you've got quality people who are there for one purpose. And it has the theme I think I'll mention as we talk through different questions. It's always going to be, why are you in that position? What brought you to want to be an educator? Are you there for the kids? And ultimately, for me, those are the type of people I'm looking for. I want to hear people who are there for kids, not for themselves, or to be, hey, I'm going to have this great program. Those things will happen, but ultimately are you there for kids? So making sure we have the right people is key to the success in any school district.
So first step, you've posted a job, et cetera, right? And now you're getting cover letters, resumes, that whole packet that everybody sends out. What kind of draws your attention to a specific packet or away from? What are some no-nos or definitely do's that, as you look for, is like definitely like yes pile, no pile sorts of things?
I know the first thing is looking at the clarity of the resume, what's on it, how quickly does it talk about the candidate's experience, and does it align with the role of the school district of what we're looking for? I don't want to have to guess at a resume. I want to make sure that it's clearly defined as to what their experiences are and what type of experiences have they had, how have they worked with, what programs have they worked with, what kids have they worked with. The school they go to is a big thing. Around here, when I was first starting as an educator, our music education programs, there were probably about 3 or 4 that were really top-notch in the state of Ohio back in the mid-90s. And today it's exploded and so much more. But, you still look for, the kids from Bowling Green and the kids from Miami, Ohio State Capitol. Where are the kids coming from? If they're newer kids, what kind of things are they bringing to the table? I also look at, the organization of what they do with their resumes. What type of impact have they had, or where they're talking about their responsibilities? What kind of growth have they done? What contributions have they made? Are they easy to see? So ultimately, for me, when it comes to looking for that resume, it's how neat is it, how accurate is it, and how well does it sell that candidate?
When I've served on committees, one thing that always just turned me off was when there were like glaring typos, or like the first sentence is, I am interested in the job at your school, instead of band director at, actual school. Is that just me? Does that sort of thing bother you? Or do you kind of look past that and dig for the actual meat?
No, I will tell you, the first thing I will look at is, and turn a resume away, is if they've spelled my name wrong. Because Fischer, you can spell it 2 different ways. You can spell it F-I-S-H, or you can spell it the correct way, in my mind, F-I-S-C-H-E-R. So that's a big thing, because when I see that spelling, that tells me, have they really dug into it, and are they paying attention to the application? I know another big no-no for me, you mentioned spelling is 100% correct, grammatical things, because, as a band director, as a music teacher, as a choir teacher, whatever you're doing, you're putting things out for the public to see. So, how important is that in regards to an application? It's exceptionally important because you need to make sure that you can clearly articulate what it is you're applying for. The other big thing is form letters. I've seen way too many times where people will apply for a job at Carlisle local schools, but they'll put some other school district. And again, it goes back to attention to detail.
Yeah.
Because we want people who truly want to be here and aren't just job hunting. Even though we know that's what people are doing, be detailed. Make sure you're truly, what's the old adage? Dotting your I's and crossing your T's. Make sure you really, really dig into those little things because it makes a difference with people.
Well, it's true in any position, but too, as an adjudicator and as a band director, we always tell our kids, details make the difference. And so details are across the board. It's not just, are you articulating notes correctly? It's also, can you put a comma in the right spot and spell Fischer correctly, right? And it doesn't take that much time to find out in the world of the internet. Go to the Carlisle schools, look at the superintendent. He spells it with a C, so I'm going to spell it with a C too. So I just don't think it takes that much time to get it done right.
No, but unfortunately, I mean, you'd be surprised. You may not be surprised because you said on interview committees, there's times where unfortunately those details are missed. And, and a lot of that just goes back, in some ways that demonstrates professionalism, because if you aren't professional enough to be able to look at those details, does that then bring up questions about other professionalisms that might be out there, issues that might be out there? So, the smallest little details are important to pay attention to.
Do you, as you go through the stack of resumes, are you also going to social media to check out some things on Facebook or Twitter or anything, or is that a misnomer? You hear that a lot, but is it true or fact or fiction?
I would be a liar if I told you it was not. It was false, because it is 100% true. I mean, and everybody is different, but a lot of it just goes back to, are you really digging into the person you want to hire? And you want to know things about them. And I tell kids, anytime I'm out talking to college level students, ironically, in the county I'm in Warren County, we actually just created for the first time this year a beginning administrators academy. And the idea was to grow our own and help them learn how to do jobs and how to prepare for interviewing for principal positions. And that was one of the big things we talked about, is in today's world, it's so easy to find out what type of person you're bringing in based on what you see on their social media page. And I remember when I was back in college, they always talked about photos, even though social media was not at all existent. Mm-hmm. But you never know when a photo might have leaked or something might have happened. Today's world, it's so easy to see those things out there in any format. And it's always very careful with how you set your social media settings, making sure that, we always tell people in all these little group sessions, set your settings so that you have to approve everything that's on there, because you never know what might pop up. And depending on the communities you're from, I mean, our communities anymore, I've learned this in 32 years, your communities change. And if you hire, and I've had experiences where we thought we hired a candidate and we did some digging, but obviously people dig deeper and they found out things about a candidate, and it unfortunately caused problems where we did not bring that person in because there was already a negative thought process behind that person. And it's unfortunate that it's based on social media, because you don't get to know the person, but people will set their impressions based on what they see. And going back to the resume thing, one of the things that's become popular is putting pictures on resumes. And generally today, most people kind of discourage that, because unfortunately it could give a false narrative to some. And it's sad that we judge a book by its cover, but that's one of the things you want to be careful of. It's what you put out and the types of things that are associated with your names, because whether you want it or not, it can cost people positions if they're not careful.
And unfortunately, in the world of the internet, other people can put things out there about you that are completely untrue, total falsehoods, but a potential employer looks it up, sees it, and it's still hurting you. And even though it's not, not true, right? So, like
100%.
Careful what you read.
Yeah. So Yeah, watch those wild. And the other big thing too, it's be careful. And again, we talked about this with the resume, but it's a good idea to bring it up. It's be careful of what your email return address might be. If you're hotmama.com, you don't want that to be your email because people are going to think, well, wait a minute, what am I bringing in here? So again, everything goes back to professionals. When you're goofing around and creating those emails,
Yep.
phone messages. I always used to joke with my brother, who is 10 and a half years younger than me. He had one at one point, he had a phone message where he would pick it up and say, hello. And then you would start talking, thinking it was him.
Oh, yeah.
And then he would say, hello, I can't hear you. So and I would always tell him, you've got to change that, because if you're going to try to get a position, you're going to irritate your employer or employee or potential employer if you do not change that. And I was right. It took him a while to get a job. So he'll never admit that I was right, but I know in my mind I was.
Of course not. Yeah, it's all those little things that you make that message when you're 19 years old, just as a college joke. And then you sort of forget about it, right? Like, I don't even know what my outgoing message is. I should probably check that. So anyway, we've got you. We sent you a great resume. You've called us. We've got the interview. Let's talk about first impressions. How much does my clothing choice matter when I walk in? You hear dress for success, but does it really matter? I always tried to wear like a school color tie of the school I'm entering. Does that matter? It always mattered in my head, but tell us a little bit about what you look for in your first impression.
So when I have someone come in, the first thing because it's your first impression, is how do they look? Is their hair neatly combed or put back? Is it out of their face? If they have facial hair, is it well groomed? When they come in, if they're male or female, what are they wearing? Is it professional look? Is it professional attire? And that's even more so important the younger a person is, because when you're looking at college kids who are coming out of school 21, 22 years of age, do they understand how to dress separately as opposed to, when you're in your college dorms, or how our high school kids dress today? Mm-hmm. For me, I love it when I see people coming in with my school colors. I know whenever I've interviewed in the past, I will not only do I wear ties that are the school color, but I'll make sure I have socks that are the school color as well, so that I can show that I've really paid attention. Because believe it or not, it's a detail that you've picked up and noticed. Hey, I know the school colors are brown and orange, and I did that because of how I investigated into the school. So that shows detail to me that, you've taken some interest and really dug into a little bit about our school. Mm-hmm. The other thing, it's, suits, jackets, ties, this sounds really odd, but I remember when I was an early teacher and I sat on an interview committee, I'll never forget the principal at that time. I thought the interview candidate was incredible, but the first comment she made to the other colleagues is, well, I'll never hire that person because it looked like they just took their jacket out of their car, because they did come in a little bit wrinkled. But to that administrator, that detail mattered. So, be as appropriately dressed and as professional as you can be, because that's going to be your very first impression with people.
Yeah. So like all those things, we're told those matter. They really do. That's great. So make sure you investigate school colors, tie your tie appropriately, iron your jacket, or at least fluff it in the dryer before you head off to your interview. I think mostly the first question in like every interview I've ever been in, and probably on both sides of that table, is tell us a little bit about yourself. And what are you really looking for as we answer that question?
For me, it's going to go back to how can you relate your experiences about yourself to the position you're applying for? Because obviously you don't want to just ramble, because you tend to. I once heard recently from a colleague of mine who they did an initial screening interview, and they originally had 5 questions in a 15 to 20 minute time frame that they were going to ask. They asked the first question about themselves. The response took 15 minutes, and then they said, "Thank you very much. We'll get back to you." Because the person just rambled.
Wow.
You want to keep the information precise, but you want to hit highlights as to why are you a candidate for what makes you the best candidate for this position. And you need to be able to be precise within that first 5 or 10 minutes or within a 5-minute section of, here's the experiences I've had. Here's how it's prepared me. Here's why I'm ready. And for me, I want to hear a little bit as to why did you become an educator? And depending on the position that there's out there, I like the people that can bring that into the fold at the beginning and talk about their why. I always say to you, what's your why? As I mentioned here at the beginning, my why was because of my high school band director, Marshall Kimball. So I want to hear people talk about their why and bring that into their experiences and continue to fold that why into the rest of their responses, because ultimately that's going to show your purpose and that's going to show your meaning. And that's what I want to hear. I want to hear why these people are doing what they're doing and how they're going to help my students be better.
I've also heard, like, don't read them the resume again, right? You've already read my resume. I don't need to tell you I went to this college and worked here. Is it a good chance to also to throw in some personal stuff that might not come up, like, well, here's a hobby that I have, or I'm married and have a child, or something like that? Or do you not want that included in that answer?
I think it just depends on how it relates to the question. There's nothing that says talking about family isn't important. And again, younger kids aren't necessarily going to be in that position. But if I'm interviewing an older candidate, for me, I would bring it in the fold of how it impacts what I've done or why I've done what I've done. So for me, again, it goes back to relating to talk about how your why helps you be ready for this position.
Another early common question in the first interview is like, what attracted you to this job, or what drew you to this? If you're a college kid, it's a job and I need one, so that's beside the wayside. But what kind of things are you looking for with that answer?
That's a tricky question because, again, it can go a lot of different ways when people talk about that. But I think a lot of it is, for me, I'm going to bring up what types of things I can do to impact the school, impact the kids. I want to talk about and I want to hear how a person is going to be a strong fit and what their strengths are. I want to hear a little bit about how they think their organization can help what's going on in the school. I want to hear that they've actually taken time to learn about what the program or school is like, and that they're bringing in, that they're coming because of what they've heard about the program or what they know about the program. I think it's also important, again, I'll go back to the original, it's how they align their skills and experience with why the job was attracted to them. My background in whatever that situation is and what I know about the history of the school has certainly made it an appealing opportunity for us to come forward. Again, because I've talked more about administrative positions, for me, my comment was always because I want to, as I moved from one position to the next, it was always about the opportunity to impact more students and more kids. Mm-hmm. But I think talking about those opportunities as well, this position attracted because the area is growing, or what you found out about that specific area, and being able to bring those ideas into that question as well. Ultimately, it's, again, how are you selling yourself to be a fit for my district?
Yeah, I always liked when they could prove they did a little research, like, well, I know your marching band is this or that, and that attracts me because that's what I would prefer. Or I know you have a history in your concert bands of this or whatever, right? Like, they did a little research. It's not just generic answer. They actually want this job, not just a job. That always meant a lot to me. They've done a little research on their own.
The one thing I've always brought into what I've said with groups that I've talked to too, because that's all 100% accurate, but you got to be careful with not making, and I know this sounds weird because you're trying to sell yourself, but be very careful not to make everything about you. You want to make sure that as you're talking, yes, you're trying to sell yourself, but you want to make sure that you're using words that also talk about your ability to be a team player as well. Because sometimes if people keep saying I, kind of like the birds from, what's that movie? It's a Disney movie.
Finding Nemo.
Finding Nemo. Yeah. I know that's not what they said, but I was trying to be funny there. But
no, that's good. Yeah.
But you want to just be careful. I mean, it's not about, it is about you, but we want to hear, how are you a team player as well? And that's a big thing as far as, bring that into why it attracted you, because I know this person, or I've been able to meet. If you know those connections, don't be afraid to bring those out, because
sure.
It does show, again, it's that research, but it shows that you're a team player and you know how to be a team player, and it's not always about you. Just as well as I do. Unfortunately, the one flaw that we band directors can sometimes be tagged with is we're too much about ourselves and not about the whole program in school.
And it's such a fine line, right? Like you said, we do have to sell ourselves. We are selling ourselves as your ideal candidate, but we have to do that in a way that makes us not seem like we're talking about ourselves. Gosh, it's so tricky, so tricky. I think my least favorite question to always get was, what are your strengths and weaknesses? Like, however you frame that question, it's always kind of the same. Like, how truthful are we supposed to be? Again, strengths seem like bragging. Weakness seems like giving you the answers of why not to hire us. What are some tips for the answer to that line of questioning?
I think the biggest thing is be honest and be strategic. The goal isn't to confess everything that you can do, but it's to show self-awareness and professionalism is the biggest thing I would say. You can look at strengths aren't necessarily bragging as long as you can back them up by examples, frame them in terms of impact and how they're going to benefit the team or the organization or the school. If you can do those ways, that helps. But again, that also shows what you've been able to learn and know about the school. Choose strengths that are relevant to that role, not just things that you're proud of. When I was in high school, as an example, or when I was in college, I had a solo. They don't really care about those things. They talk about how your playing ability has helped you and how it will help teach other kids to be better performers. So make sure that you can make it relevant to what's going on. And I think the other big thing is avoid vague answers. Like, I'm a hard worker. Well, what does that mean? Be specific with the responses, because obviously, again, you need to sell yourself, but you need to make sure that they have pertinent information that's going to support why you're applying and why you're interviewing for that position.
Another common end of round one sort of question is when the interview turns to you, what questions do you have for us? And that's always really tricky too, not the ideal time to ask about compensation packages, etc. But what are some things in this point, first round interview level, that demonstrate to you there's a good working relationship? I'm the person that you want to have back. What are some good things to put there?
For me, when I hear candidates start asking more specific questions about what they're applying for example, what does success look like for you for the band program? Mm-hmm. What do you as the administrators look at that make that program successful? If parents are in the room, how does that look? What is success for you as a parent? If they have other teachers, I know for me, I've always had interview committees because I believe it's important that it's not just the principal, but you involve the kids in the program, because ultimately for band positions, it's their program. And so I want to hear the kids' input. Not a lot of administrators are willing to do that. I want the parents' input. So be thinking about that. I just kind of threw that out there. But when you're talking about success, looking at each individual and saying, what does success look like for you? Other things are what are opportunities for students to perform outside of school? That shows that you're trying to dig into what is the community like? Where are things that kids have gone or done before? And sometimes most administrators might not understand that or know that question, but it shows, again, that you're interested in more than just what's going on at school, what's going on outside. I think it's okay to always talk about and ask about professional development opportunities and mentors. If I'm a new teacher, what kind of mentorship am I going to have? Am I allowed to be able to do some professional development? If I'm an incoming teacher, am I going to have somebody who's got experience and maybe going to a new school? That shows, am I going to be able to have somebody who can be there to help? What's the parent and community involvement? I think asking questions along those lines that show you're trying to really dig into what the program is like. And hopefully some of those things have come out during the interview. But if they don't, always thinking about, this is your chance to interview that interview community to see, is this really the job I want? Is this the move I want to make? So you want to think about questions that help you phrase those ideas to give you a better vision of what you might be walking into.
Well, and especially this is true if you already have a job, because there is more of that interview, like you're interviewing both ways. This is someplace I want to work. If you're graduated from college, you may just, especially the time of year, you may just work anywhere, sort of. But I always found it was like really fun to ask those questions and then watch the administrator respond. what role does the band play in the fabric of the school? And hopefully, like, what's their answer? Or what do you feel, what defines success for the program? And sometimes they have great answers, and sometimes they kind of stammer around too, and they don't really have an answer for that. That could be a warning sign too, right?
Absolutely. And that's where it goes back to, you want to make sure that you're asking questions that are going to help you decide if this is really the right place to go. Another one I always remember asking when I was a band director, it's, what's your vision of the band program in the next 3 to 5 years? Because that then tells me what their support method is going to be. If you hear them say, we expect the program to grow, we expect the program to become more known around the area, those are just, that gives you an idea of, oh, they are going to support me and help me make sure that, we truly are doing the best with music education that we can in this district.
Sure. So we walk out, we think we had a good interview, or we think we had a bad interview. And the answer was we never actually know, right? I felt like I've had great interviews and then never heard anything, and vice versa. But there's always this in between, like, will they call? Did I miss the call? Are they ghosting me? What's going on? Did they ask for somebody else? Am I not in? Are they just waiting a while? Like, is it ever acceptable to send a follow-up email or phone call? Like, hey, haven't heard anything. Did I miss something? Like, how should we as the candidate approach that in between interviews time?
I think the one thing to think about is ask the timeline. It's okay to ask the timeline. What is the process? What are your next steps? Because this way, at least now you have an idea of what they're doing. And sometimes, depending on the group, they may give that to you ahead of time. But if they don't, that's certainly something that it's okay to ask. But then in the meantime, the one thing I've always done, and I find this incredibly a positive, is when I have people just drop an email to me a day or two after and just simply say, hey, wanted to thank you for your time today for the interview. Appreciate the committee. But I think that's also an opportunity for you to throw something else in there about how you felt the interview went. And I don't mean by saying, hey, I thought I did a great job during this interview. Thanks a lot.
Right.
But it's a way to throw in another, something maybe you said, or something maybe that was said from the comments from the end, your questions at the end, using I want to see the band program grow in the next 3 to 5 years. Hey, I'm really excited about this opportunity, and here's what I see being a positive with that and how I can help fit in that mold. And so trying to just send a very quick thank you, but also give one little nugget that shows that you heard what they were saying and responding back to that. But I think that's a big thing. But outside of that, you got to be very careful because you don't want to come across too aggressive. While it's a hard thing to wait, my best advice is don't call because it's going to show sometimes being impatient, and we don't need people. We don't want impatient people. So it's a fine line, but the best advice I would give to anybody is just ask what that timeline is and understand. And if you're that candidate and it's meant to be, they'll reach out to you.
And I always really appreciated, like, while it hurts to get the email or a quick phone call, hey, we've decided to move in another direction. Yeah, that sucks to get. But it's better that than wait weeks and weeks and weeks and not hear anything and then just assume. Do you sometimes send that, like, hey, thank you, we moved in a different direction?
We always do. That has always been my thing with my administrators. I've told them all, and I've been doing that. Even when I was a principal, I would always send a Dear John letter. Thank you, but we've moved into different, just because it serves as closure. Because you're right, the worst feeling ever is, well, what's going on? How do I know? So it's always one of those things that's always nice to do. And not every school is like that, unfortunately, but we do that in my districts. We've always been very good about sending follow-up letters when the process is over. And usually now, depending on the program you're on, in the Dayton area, they have the Dayton Area Job Consortium that posts positions. And it's very easy to send a mass email out to those candidates. But I've had my principals call, depending on if we're down to the final two. I've always been one to have my administrators call the candidate that did not get the job to let them know too, because it's that personal opportunity. And we always get the question, what could I have done differently? And you got to be careful with how you respond to that as an administrator. But the best response is, we had a different candidate we felt was a better fit at this time, but we appreciate your time.
Yeah.
So, we've always been that way, and I wish more. If I could teach administrative 101 to everybody, that would be the one thing I would tell people. It's don't leave them hanging, because it's not. Do you remember what it felt like? So,
well, as the guy who's often gotten the no thank you, I would much rather have the phone call or just a simple email and just 2 sentences. We've decided to go in a different direction. Thank you for your time. Sincerely, Bob Fischer. Whatever. Like, just good.
Yep.
Delete the email, and now we can all move on with our lives, right? Better than like waiting and thinking, and every time the phone rings, you flinch or whatever. So, but that didn't happen. We got the second round interview. We're coming back for the second time around. What is different in the second round? What should we be prepared to do differently? What do you do differently in a round 2 interview?
So my big thing when I bring candidates back is I actually will do a teaching interview, because I've heard what they've had to say. Now I want to see what they can do. So we have always done, for any teaching position, I bring them back. I put them in the classroom. I give them a sample lesson that we want them to teach. And it's a 20 or 30-minute prepared lesson that they're doing in front of students and a couple members from the interview committee. When I've done band positions, it's usually I bring my high school band in, and I have the candidates get up in front of them and rehearse with the students. So during that, and I think that's become more of a common practice in today's world, because it is a very competitive world out there. There are a lot of really, really good young band directors out there who are eager for jobs. And so for me, this is a great opportunity to see how they connect with people. So during that time frame, I'm looking for, again, how are they connecting with the kids? What kind of things are they saying up there? And for me, being a music person, it makes it even easier, because I have obviously an understanding of what it goes into teaching a program. So, I can when they're talking about words or trying to correct things, or, I'm really paying attention to what it is they're doing. I do know that that's become more common, but I don't know how truly it is around all of the state. I don't know. Have you ever had that opportunity where you've gone back and had to do a teaching interview?
I had a couple, not a full band situation. I had a couple where I actually had one where one of the middle school principal or something was not a musician, and they opened up a clarinet and said, pretend I'm a beginning clarinet, teach me how to put this clarinet together. Or they brought in like a middle school trombone student or something and said, could you give this student a 10-minute lesson? So same sort of thing, but not full band. And I like the one where I had to teach the administrator to put a clarinet together. That was fun. I had a blast doing that. And then I got the no thank you, we'd like to move on. And I think one of the things about any of those teaching experiences is to remember, at least in my opinion, is every school district is so different. Their communities are different. Don't try to be somebody you're not, because if you're acting like somebody else, you're going to give them the false impression either one way or the other, right? You might not be the right personality for their district, but at least we all know it now, rather than trying to be somebody you think you're supposed to be, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah. 100%. And that's a great statement, because again, you have to sell who you are, not who their band director was before or who you think they want, because eventually the truth is going to come out. You've got to sell who you are. And one thing I was going to say too with that, you got to remember what you've said during your first interview, because those are the things that they're going to be looking at. So if I'm talking in my first interview about how I interact with students, they're going to be watching to see, how do you interact with kids? If someone's talking, how are you going to handle classroom discipline? How are you going to keep kids not being engaged in what's going on? What are you doing? Are you moving around, or are you staying in one position? But, the important thing during that second round interview is you have to remember the first things you said earlier, which if you don't, that means it's not truly who you are.
Right.
But again, it goes back to, how are you selling yourself to get this position? You were brought back for a purpose. Now, what's the shine that you can put on that first round to truly make that position yours? And typically in second rounds, that's where more of the group interviews come into play. You may not necessarily be standing in front of a band, but you're going to be meeting those kids. And again, it's all about, do you make connections? Are you able to make connections? Because that's the thing you've got to realize too, that when you go in for that second round, you're a step away from being hired. Are you connecting with the people that are in that room? And do you feel like you can work with them? Because, that's if you don't connect with them and you take that job, is that really the right job for you? So not only are they interviewing you for a second time, but it's another opportunity for you to get a read on what that school might be like, and are they saying the same things that they said during that first round? So,
Right.
there's so many different facets and things you can look at with that. But part of it is you got to make sure you're in the mindset to really be open about what you're seeing, and is this really the right place? And if you're in front of the band for the doing that, is this something you can see yourself doing? Are these kids you can see yourself working with? And how do you approach that? And so those are all things during that second round interview you need to be thinking about.
When it comes to whether they're teaching or it's the discussion with the group, and you start to talk about things like classroom management, discipline, lesson pacing, those types, nut and bolts of teaching, and you start to interact with those, are you listening for specific answers regarding those things, or more that they have an answer and it's conviction and they know what they plan to do or who they are?
It's a little bit of both. For me, I'm going to be listening for key things such as, how do you handle involvement? How do you handle communication? How do you handle engagement? What types of things are you talking about that show that you're student-centered? I mentioned this at the very, very beginning. How frequently are you talking about the importance of your why? Why did you become a teacher? How are you bringing that into the conversations? Because, again, I want a person who's not just passionate about music, but I want a person who is showing me they're passionate about teaching kids a lifelong activity. I kick myself all the time because I'm a trumpet player by nature. It's been 4 years since I've last played my trumpet because I've allowed it to get away from me. But I know that, I can pick it right back up at any minute and do it because it's that lifelong skill I've learned. But I did that because of who my teachers were in the past. Mm-hmm. And I've been very fortunate, in my experience as a band director to have, and as a teacher, to have some great role models in my life, and I'm still connected with them. But I want that passion. I want to hear that passion from our candidates as they're talking to us, because to me, I want that person, because our kids deserve that. And no matter what the field is, no matter science, math, music, history, I want to hear the passion as to why. But, the other thing, it's how, the connection. Are they connecting with people? When you're interviewing, one of the biggest important skills that I've always thought is, are you making eye contact with the people you're talking to, or are you talking over them? Are you having conversations as you're interviewing, or are you talking at people? That tells a lot about a person too, because if you have someone who's constantly talking over me and not listening to what I'm saying, that shows a character trait that I don't necessarily know if I want to have in my school. But if you're actually conversing with the person and you're making eye contact, especially if someone's asking that question, make sure you look at that person, but make sure you look at the others in the room too as you're responding, because that's, it's that connection you're making. So those are kind of, and again, 32 years of doing this. So I've seen a lot of very interesting interviews in my time. Mm-hmm. I've been part of some comical things that you would never believe. A story, I remember I was interviewing someone for a PE position at one time, and this person had great passion, but they turned us off right from the beginning because they came in with a gigantic suitcase. This is a true story. Came in with a suitcase, plopped down the suitcase on the table, and before we can ask a question, opened it up, started taking out pictures from their childhood of all the trophies that they won, and just lost the committee at that point because there was no connection there. Yeah.
What?
Yeah. I've seen some very interesting interviews in my career as an administrator.
Well, I've walked out of interviews thinking I bombed the interview, but I've never done that. So I may not have got the job, but I'm not the story they're probably telling right now. That's interesting. So,
and ironically, that happened 22 years ago because it was the first year I was an administrator that interview took place. So I still remember that 22 years ago.
I assume you didn't hire the person.
No, and ironically, that person did email back and asked how they could be better. Oh, yeah. So don't leave the suitcase at home.
Yeah, leave the suitcase in the trunk of the car. So. All right, so
it's just about connections. You got to make connections,
right.
and that's what I'm looking for. It's how are you connecting with me, and what kinds of things are you saying to connect with me on that?
And do you think that they will connect with your student population. And again, it goes back to this could be a great I know I've sat in interviews and I thought this person is going to be a fantastic teacher, just not for our kids.
Yeah, and I've had those same thoughts as well too, because again, it's you know your students better than anybody. At least you would hope most administrators know their students, and that's not always the case. But and this isn't about me, but because I do feel like I have a good handle of what's going on in my building because I go out and I talk to kids. Not that, and this is something that I think if a person asks, you can say, but I do student groups where I meet with a student committee twice a year because I want to hear what the kids are having to say and I want to hear how the kids are engaging with things that are going on in our building. And so I take that, and that's how I know when I'm interviewing people, I know I want to hear that those people are going to tell me what these kids are saying to me in our separate meetings. And that's how I gauge when I hire people.
And I would think, this is a separate question, but as I've watched, fellow teachers become administrators and superintendents and that sort of thing, I've always wondered, the reason you become a teacher is because you want to have the interaction with the students day to day, build that relationship, especially band directors over years of time. And then when you move to an administrative office, the further you move into the central office, so to speak, the further you get from the students, metaphorically and literally, right? Like a lot of times central office is in a different part of town or whatever. So that's a really interesting way to you've managed to invent ways to stay connected, even though you're not day to day in those classrooms.
Yeah, because it's important, just like no matter what position you hold, again, the focus has to be what's best for kids. And our job is to help do what's best for kids and educate kids to our best ability. But you can't do that if you don't know what the kids want.
Right.
And today's kids are different. Today's kids are very different and that's going back to the question of, what am I listening for? Our kids today, because of all the technology they have, there's a lot of other things that they can do that doesn't necessarily involve you. So as a teacher, as an administrator, I want to hear, how are you going to keep our kids involved? And what are you going to do to get kids to want to be in your program? And those are things that I'm truly listening for and keying in on during interviews.
The time has come for a decision. You've got a couple of candidates. They've been through the second round. How much does an experienced person versus a cheaper first year teacher, how much does that ever really factor in? And I know that's a complicated question. You're going to say, well, there's a lot of factors involved, but is there any discussion about that ever?
Yeah, and sadly, Bob, today it's even more of a discussion because then now I got to put my superintendent hat on and talk a little bit. But the frustrating thing that we deal with now, it's the whole funding of schools right now, and that could be a whole separate podcast at some point. It's what is our state doing to public schools right now? And notice I stated public schools because unfortunately public schools aren't being treated in the same manner that unfortunately some of our private and charter schools are, especially when it comes to funding. But unfortunately, and younger people might be happy to hear this, a lot more schools are going with people with inexperience because it's cheaper. Especially when you think of a band director who comes out with, master's degrees at times like that. Unfortunately, it does hurt people. But I also think a lot of it depends on the program too. If I'm at a Mason or a Lakota or, a bigger program, I'm not going to bring in somebody who's brand new. I'm going to bring in somebody with experience. So a lot of it's relevant to the position. If I'm a small school, I'm going to look for, most people are going to look for cost. Now, myself as an administrator, because again, I understand the band world and I understand what it takes, I'm going to look for the best candidate. If that means I'm going to hire someone with 10 years who is the best candidate, then that's who I'm going to go with. But a lot of it's just relevant to the locations, to the areas, and the type of programs you're going to be looking to hire. So it's not an easy question to with one simple answer, because it just simply depends on what's going on around you.
Well, as somebody once said, I don't want to say it's all about the money, but quite frankly, it's all about the money. It is. School funding is an issue. Reduction of the tangible property tax. All of the things, right? This is not a political podcast. I actually avoid politics when at all possible. But But it's true, right? Like you've still got to keep on the heats and the light as the superintendent, and in conjunction with treasurer and school board. You got to keep on the electricity and the heat and the lights, and have other stuff too. So you can't just go. You got to think. You got to consider it. It just has to be. It just has to be a factor. When we consider personality of fit with your staff, specifically of the candidate, knowledge of the subject, or perceived connections with students, like which of those three, could you put those three like in order of most important?
My first and most important is going to be connection with the students, because obviously that's why we're hiring that person. It's how are you going to connect with our kids and help them grow? The next one, for me, it's personality to our staff. Are you going to fit well with our staff? Because again, in order to help a program grow, you need to have the kids, but you need to have a staff that's going to support that program as well. And for me, the last is knowledge of subject, because you could be the most knowledgeable. You could be John Philip Sousa, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to interact well with our kids. And we want someone who can come in and, again, be able to teach these kids how to play and how to be musicians. But you got to be able to relate to them, because you've probably seen it. I know I've seen it. You've seen people who have a hard time relating. They're great musicians and they know their subject, but they can't relate. And if you can't relate to students, you can't build a program. And the only way that a program is truly going to survive is by numbers and by building. And program doesn't have to be, a success is in 100 kids. You can have 25 kids and have just as strong of a program as a program that has 100 kids. But a lot of that just simply goes back to how are you relating to the students that you have?
I mean, you're describing me early in my career, I think, and I've always had, my strength has always been building connections with students. And I think early in my career, we all did, but I had a lot of gaps in my knowledge of subject and pedagogy. But because I was motivated, I filled in those gaps. That's a lot easier gaps. Like you could figure out woodwind fingerings a lot easier than you can figure out how to connect with students, right? Like one is easier to teach and learn than the other.
Well, I agree. I was say, when I was a teacher, I may not have been the best theory person or could tell you every wind ensemble piece that was out there, but I felt like I was strong in getting kids to be part of the program because and you base it based on numbers. And we were fortunate. I was very fortunate as a band director that I had great kids and we had very good programs. But I attribute that not necessarily to me. It's the staff I also built around me to help me as well, too, because just like you said, we all have weaknesses. And a lot of that is you hire staff that are going to help overcome the weaknesses you have.
Right. Yeah. What about references? We give you a list of references. At what point do you call them? How much does that matter? Do you ever go out and call people that aren't on our reference list, but that probably know us? How does that factor?
Yeah, I'm going to use the phrase, don't burn bridges, because you never know when that bridge might need to be crossed. And a lot of administrators are very connected with, not only just through your county, but depending on what that person did or taught. Previous to becoming an administrator, you never know where those connections are going to come back. I remember my very first administrative position at Carlisle. It had been 4 years since I had left Brookville High School, but my administrator knew somebody at Brookville and called them to get a reference. And so that's why it's important not to burn bridges, because even though you may be gone from that position for 3 or 4 years, that person might know who that is. So for me, I'll call people on their reference lists. You would expect those to be positive, but I'm also going to dig. If it's a new kid coming out of school, I'm going to probably call someone from their university. It was very lucky for me, for a while when I was just out, I had a lot of connections through judging. And so, I would call universities. Miami University was a big one I would call because of people I knew. I had some connections at Bowling Green. I had connections at Capitol. So if I was interviewing people for there, I would dig. I remember one time, ironically, I was hiring a band director, and he was a trumpet player who was at Ohio State. And I knew Tim Lazier. So I called Tim, because Tim, ironically, was my first instructor for my first private lesson instructor for trumpet. And I called Tim out of the blue and I said, "Hey, it's Bob Fischer. And he was kind of stunned for a few moments, but we talked about one of the candidates, because again, he wasn't one of the references for this individual, but I knew he played trumpet at Ohio State. So I knew I could call Tim and get a reference. So it's important. Don't burn those bridges, because you never know when they, like I said earlier, may need to be crossed. But to me, I call at least 3 or 4 references to, if I'm interested in a candidate, because I want to make sure there's nothing I'm missing with those people.
Right. Any other suggestion, do's or don'ts, final thoughts, suggestions for people looking for jobs?
The big thing is just be yourself when you go into the interview. You said it when we talked a bit ago, don't be someone you're not. There was something I was going to bring up because it is important. It's that first initial handshake. When you give a good solid handshake when you go in and meet someone, because that tells a lot about a person too, doggone it.
Yeah.
Give a good firm hug. But no, ultimately it's just be who you are and show them who you are. If you, it's okay to relax, and it's okay to be loose with what you're saying and how you're doing things, because ultimately you got to show them who you are. So don't hide behind someone you're not. Don't try to be someone you're not, because eventually that's going to come out. And if it's a negative, it's going to come out in your interview. It's going to come out in your evaluation process. So make sure you are who you are. And if you say you're going to do something, make sure you follow through with those statements, because again, when it comes time to get through that first year contract, because you're only given one contract for 1 year, you want to make sure that you can show people that you truly are the thing you say you are. Because if you say you're going to do all these things and then you end up not being that person, you're going to be out of a job, and now you're going to have a negative reference moving forward. So it's important to be who you are and just be open, be open, be relaxed, and just and have a little bit of fun with it as you're going through it, because they need to see the type of person you really are going to be.
Well, shout out to Mr. Welker from Faircrest Memorial Middle School, my 8th grade health teacher, who made us learn how to shake a hand properly. and we had to take a test. There's like a 10-point test. We had to shake his hand, and we got rated on a scale of, but he made a big deal of it. And I've always remembered that. Not too loose, not too firm. You're not trying to break knuckles either. That mid-range, right? On the flip side, let's turn this around just for a minute. There's 2 schools of thought here. When I was a teacher looking for a job outside of my current district, I always told my principal, hey, I'm looking for jobs. I'm applying here. I didn't want them blindsided. I didn't want to keep secrets. But on the flip side of that, some school of thought is like, well, I don't want them to think I'm not loyal to this district, or that, how do you feel? Like, do you want a teacher coming to you and saying, hey, just to let you know, or would you rather just not know and avoid the sleepless nights of knowing that you might have a staff member leaving?
And again, everybody's going to be different. For me, I would rather know, because I don't like being caught off guard by things. And I would also hope for teachers that work with us, and again, everybody's different, and teachers are different too, but hopefully you've built enough of a rapport and connection with your building administrator to say, here's why I'm looking. It's not because of something here. I'm never going to fault someone because you have to earn. Unfortunately, you have to live. And in order to live, you need to have money. And unfortunately, not everybody is going to be able to pay as well as others. And I'm never going to fault the person who comes up to me and says, hey, I've got an opportunity to apply for a bigger program, or that's going to pay a little bit more. I get those things because I was a young band director. I remember what it was like for my very first teacher salary, and how I was living, paycheck. And I was married at that time too, still married, living paycheck by paycheck. So I'm never going to fault someone. I would rather a person be honest with me and say, here's why, as opposed to finding out, here you think you have a connection with that person. All of a sudden you're finding out, oh, they've interviewed. I wonder what happened or why. But I also do know too, in my current role as a superintendent, I do interview when people leave as well, because I'm curious to know why. What is it about that's going? Because we want to help make sure it's better. But to me, my belief is always be honest. But there are administrators who would not look at that as a negative as well too, because, oh, well, you're leaving, you don't like it here, what's the matter with us? So yeah, I think a lot of it just depends on the person. There's not a right answer to that, because everybody's different. So like I said, it's one of those things. You got to know who the person is, and if you know who the person is, then you got to be able to be honest with them.
Bob, thank you for your time. Again, I know you're very, very busy, so you spent a lot of time with us. Do you have time to talk a little Star Wars before we leave, though?
May the force be with you.
All right. I love it. We do a lot of Star Wars on this podcast. So on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being you're not sure who Luke's father is, and 10 being that you do know about Luke Skywalker's evil clone, how big of a Star Wars fan are you?
I would say I'm probably an 8. I didn't know Luke Skywalker had an evil clone, so I'm kind of confused by that one. But big Star Wars fan. I mean, especially the original trilogy, 4, 5, and 6.
Yeah.
Those are by far. I've seen every Star Wars movie that's been made and watched a lot of the miniseries. So you got me. I'm there. Let's keep going.
Well, the evil clone comes from the novel, so if you're not delving into the novels,
Okay.
you won't know about the evil clone. But it's an interesting.
Okay.
Pretty interesting story. So,
yeah, I always thought the clone was just Princess Leia. So when you asked that question, I had to go back and think, did I miss something somewhere?
no, you didn't miss it. It's not in the movies.
Okay.
So, what is your favorite movie of any? This includes like the side movies, like Solo, etc. What's your favorite movie?
Return of the Jedi, 100%.
All right. What about your favorite character?
My favorite character is Obi-Wan Kenobi, and the reason why. It actually goes back to one of my kids. When my youngest son, who is now 26, was going to preschool, he introduced himself as Obi-Wan Kenobi. so that is why I've always been an Obi-Wan fan, because of my son Michael and his commentary. But Obi-Wan Kenobi is my favorite.
Okay, now do you like the elder Obi-Wan Kenobi or more of the Ewan McGregor Obi-Wan Kenobi?
I'm okay with either of them.
Okay.
I mean, because of just the time frame with the different movies. I certainly liked, what is it? Is it Ben? I can't think of the actor that played him. But I definitely liked obviously you only really saw him in the first one, and then the ghosts in the other. But I did like the way Ewan McGregor played it as well too. So I really, over the two, I don't have one of the favorite. They're both, I like them both.
Alec Guinness is the older,
Guinness, thank you.
The original series, and then it's Ewan McGregor. And the more recent series, the Disney Plus series, I just rewatched it for the 4th time. Outstanding, just amazing. So if you haven't watched that series, it's only 6 episodes. They're about 45 minutes each, so it's not a ton of time to invest.
That's Ewan McGregor too, correct?
Yes.
Yes, that's why I've seen that. Yeah, I've watched that one. I think the last one we watched was The Mandalorian. So looking forward to the Mandalorian movie coming out.
Yeah, it's going to be hopefully going to be great. I don't know about the title, like The Mandalorian and Grogu. I don't know about the title, but I'm willing to.
Yeah.
We'll see how it goes. What about your favorite villain?
Darth Vader.
Yeah. I mean, Vader's the classic, right? The first one you got to go to. My favorite villain actually is Darth Maul. I love Darth Maul. He's fantastic, but that's it.
Why? Why is he your favorite?
If you only have watched the movies, you've really only seen him for 10 minutes of screen time. He's only in The Phantom Menace and 30 seconds at the end of Solo, the Star Wars movie. But if you watch the Clone Wars animated series late in the later seasons, he's all over it. He's super powerful. He's super smart, very intellectual. He's a thoughtful planner. He always knows what's going on. He's part of the Night Sister clan, which is a really cool, just evil witch clan of just bad women. It's awesome. And I don't know, he just really, the red face, the horns, just everything about him is just, I don't know, he's such a bad dude. I love it. And he's totally respectful to his opponent. He always calls Obi-Wan Kenobi Master Kenobi, Lady Tano. He's very, very respectful and honest. He never lies. He tells you exactly what he's going to do. It's an evil thing probably, but he's not playing games. Here's what I'm going to do. Here's what I'm about. Everything you get right on the surface. I love it.
So we go back with Darth Vader, because he's one when he didn't like you, he just got you out of his way.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, Vader's absolutely a classic. And again, he's great in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series too.
Yes.
Hayden Christensen sort of gets a positive reboot to his Star Wars legacy, because he wasn't that great in the earlier movies.
I felt bad for him, because the way they ended when he was when you think of the third movie, the new third movie, the worst part of that whole movie I was going to it, and then all of a sudden when he becomes Darth Vader, and you hear the breath, but then you hear the you lose it the moment he does the screaming when he realizes that quote unquote his family, his children, or Padme dies.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, you just lost me on that part because that was not Darth Vader at all.
No, and the whole script in the prequels is just there's just so many problems been chronicled on previous episodes of Symbols and Cynicism, so they can go back and listen to that. So, any least favorite, like least favorite movie, least favorite character?
Jar Jar.
That is probably the most typical answer, Jar Jar. Yeah, they try to redeem him in the animated movie or the animated series too by it doesn't work. He was supposed to be the comic relief, and it doesn't happen for me. So, any favorite Star Wars scenes or moments, or like one thing that's like, man, if I could just relive that moment again and again, I'd be happy.
Oh my gosh, there's probably several, but because I was a kid when the original Star Wars movies came out, I think my one scene that I remember kind of flipping out over was when Darth Vader told Luke he was his father.
Yeah.
Because it's like, wait a minute, where did that come from? What? Who? Did he just say what I think he's? I mean, I remember, because I would have been 10-ish, 11-ish maybe, probably, about 10 or 11 when that came out. So I was into the Star Wars figures and all the big things that you could buy with the battle stars and all the ships and all those things. Yep. So I loved Star Wars, played it all the time. But I remember when that came out, I'm thinking, wait a minute, how can that be? He's not a real, so that by far is the one thing that I remember specifically sitting there in my mouth, jaw dropping with, he's his father? Wait a minute. So that by far is probably my favorite memory from the scene from the Star Wars. And then Luke just kind of loses it and falls out.
Yeah, I agree. The Empire Strikes Back is my favorite movie. I think it's absolutely perfect Star Wars. I think it's where Star Wars finally found its groove. I like A New Hope, but it's kind of super clunky. The budget was small, and just like everything is just, it's great, but it's not, like Empire Strikes Back is where Star Wars, in my opinion, became Star Wars. And I remember being, I think it was 1981. So I was like 8 years old or something. And like, it was the playground talk. I remember being on the playground like, who is Luke's father? And then, no way, it's not. He's lying. And, all this, like, I remember those, monkey bar conversations. And I think it's why I love all the new Star Wars stuff we're getting, because me and my friends and guests on this podcast, like this feels right now like you and I are on the monkey bars, talking about Star Wars. We're 10 years old. And I think that's the great thing about Star Wars is my son, who's almost 18 now, but he has his Star Wars movies and moments, and I have mine. We share them together, and we watch Star Wars all the time together. And it's just, there's bad things about Star Wars, but man, it just brings everybody together. It's just, I don't know, it's just great. Well, I love Star Wars.
In my family, so my two boys are 18 months apart, and they always joked about being the Sith and the Jedi.
Oh yeah,
that was always the joke between those two. And my oldest son was the Sith, and my youngest son was the Jedi, and they would. So you hear you say that makes me start thinking about memories with them and them watching Star Wars, and so it's one of those. You said it. It's one of those things that is spaced over so much time that us sci-fi junkies love that kind of stuff. And it keeps you connected and it helps you bring back the memories of the old. So I would agree. I could see us sitting on the Jungle Gym right now talking about it. So.
And don't you wish, like I said this just the other week to my wife and my son, I said, if I could do anything over again in my life, it would be to go back and watch Star Wars for the first time again.
Yep. I remember seeing it in the big drive-through movie theater was the first time I saw it.
Yeah.
And when and hearing that music and I remember when the new series came out, because we took our family, my wife took our 4 kids, and and for my wife and I, as soon as you heard the music come across, and then how they did the scroll, it was like, wow, it's happening again. I remember having goosebumps as it was playing, because like, oh my gosh. So,
and I'm so glad, all the new technology and et cetera is great, but I'm glad they've maintained like that, like the opening shot, the scroll, there's always almost always some sort of starship coming overhead at the first sheet, like those little elements that they've maintained. I'm just so glad they've maintained all of those things through the main Skywalker saga anyway. So
100% agree.
Hey man, thank you so much. This is great stuff on the interview. Great stuff on Star Wars. I really appreciate you being my guest. Good luck with your hires this spring. Hopefully there aren't too many, but hopefully the ones that you have, you find a lot of really great candidates, and then get some rest this summer because school years are stressful. And I know superintendents work all summer too, but hopefully you can get a little time away with your family to do some relaxation.
I appreciate the opportunity, and hopefully we can talk some other time. So thanks a lot, sir.
Glad to have you back.
Relax. No. Breathe. Find your happy place.
Parking garages. The front sign usually says full or space available. Fine. I like that. Get your ticket at the gate on the way in. Fine. I like that. Now we're inside with not enough room to turn the corners, and not enough room if you have a vehicle coming the other way, and sometimes up is down and down is up and turn this way and turn that way, and the painted arrows are fading because they haven't been painted in a long time, and my transition lenses haven't adjusted from the sunlight to the darkness. Okay, but now we're looking for a place to park, and the spots are so small. I have a normal-sized car, a small SUV, if you must know, and I can barely fit into one of these spots. But large cars take up the line or more, and now there are empty spots that no one can fit into. Even the littlest, miniest cars can't fit in there. Why are the spots so small? I know it saves money to put more spaces in an equal number of square feet, but if the spaces aren't usable, then what's the point? But we did find a spot, and now we're on our way back trying to get out. And sometimes you pay at the gate on the way out. Sometimes you pay at a kiosk found near every elevator before you get back to your car, unless you took the steps and didn't see the kiosk. And sometimes they have a limited number of kiosks, and you have to hunt and search to find the one, and then it's broken, and then you continue your hunt, and finally you find one. But now you did that, and you're on your way back out, except there's a line because the person at the front didn't get the kiosk memo, and they're trying to back up to return to find the kiosk, which is probably broken, and there isn't enough room for those shenanigans. Parking garages are great in theory and terrible in execution. I feel better. Do you feel better? I feel a little bit better. Homework for the week. There's no homework for the week. Spring break, I'm taking a week off, and so should you. Okay, that's the show. Make sure you leave a rating, drop a comment, or send a message on the app of your choice. You can text the show with the link at the bottom of the description. You can check out our merch store at themarchingarts.com/RHS and our YouTube channel at Robert H. Sloan RHS Music, all one word. We hope you'll join us in 2 weeks for Drums in a Gym with Nick Riley and The Titanic. Thanks for joining me today. The theme music is Superfly, written by me, copyright RHS Music. The show logo is designed by John Suh, and our producer is my sister, Kathy. I hope you'll join us next time for more reflections and rantings on symbols and cynicism.